back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the Scoreboard. We are back with another episode for you here live, coming from the Purple Heart home studio, the new Statesville location for WSIC. Again, I got to remind you guys, today's episode is not live in person. It is recorded from earlier in the day. And you know how it goes. I always give you guys the same warning just in case, because you never know. But with this episode being pre-recorded, and it's pretty early in the morning right now, actually, there is a chance that news breaks that I am not able to talk about today. Now, I also want to let you know what happened with yesterday's show and Monday's show. So Monday, I had recorded an episode for you guys, but I had a problem getting it all set up and on air in time for 5 o'clock. So unfortunately, we didn't have that yesterday, or I'm sorry, on Monday. So what we did was we played the one for Monday yesterday. So if you were a little confused as I was saying Monday and yesterday was Tuesday, well, that's why, unfortunately, we did have to move it around a little bit. But today I'm recording this on a Wednesday. Hopefully you guys hear this on a Wednesday, and it's a beautiful day out there. We didn't get to talk about the snow. Man, if you're in Statesville, you definitely got a lot of snow, because I walked outside Tuesday morning and I couldn't see the grass. There was ice everywhere. It was kind of a mess. So hopefully everybody did enjoy the snow, though. I know it's been over 1,000 days, right? That's what they've been saying. Anyway, we're not going to talk about what's going on with the weather, although I do bring it up every now and then. We do want to talk about sports, the world of sports, high school, college, NFL. Today's a big day because last night college football dropped their rankings, the college football playoff rankings. So now when you look at the rankings and you look at the playoff predictor, things line up a lot more, and it's much more interesting to see now that we know exactly who is ranked where, who needs to do what in order to get in to the college football playoff. Now, I will say it's very interesting what we have going on right now, because there is the potential for Alabama, who's not in a conference championship, to miss the playoffs. It is possible. I don't know if it'll happen. It really depends on what the rankings are after we come back from the conference championship weekend. So we're going to get into that a little bit. We're also going to talk some basketball, NBA basketball. We had some in-season cup games that were going on last night. More group games, and the field is now set for the knockout round of the in-season cup. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We have 8 teams going to be battling in single eliminations to get to the championship, which will be played in Las Vegas. And I will say the fact that it's played in Las Vegas is very interesting to me, because we've heard the rumblings of a team maybe coming out to Las Vegas. Maybe we get a new franchise out there. LeBron could own it. And now they're really starting to bring basketball to the city of Las Vegas, which if they get the baseball team, which I guess is still kind of up in the air, but if they do get the basketball team, they'll have all 4 major sports. They started out with hockey, then the Raiders came to town. Now they're trying to get baseball, and I'm sure basketball, at least NBA basketball, because they have a WNBA team. We've talked about the Aces. They are a very good program over there, but they'd at least have the 4 major men's sports in Las Vegas, which is, I guess it makes sense considering the way that sports have gone recently with how many gambling ads you see. And where do you go to gamble? Well, it used to just be Las Vegas, but it's still the center of it. So with sports gambling becoming as prevalent as it is, having teams in Las Vegas makes sense. It just does. So we're not going to talk about that. We are going to talk about the knockout rounds here. Quarterfinal, semifinal, championship is how it'll go. So we'll have that to talk about as well. We're also going to get into high school basketball. Yes, yesterday when you listened to the program, we talked about everything that happened in high school football. Today is a big basketball day for us. The season is still starting off pretty slow, but that is definitely going to pick up, as we get into the new year. Things are slow at the beginning of the season here. Not that many games being played. And then we got the winter break, obviously. There are going to be some teams playing during winter break, tournaments from around the area and things like that. So we'll keep you updated on everything going around in the basketball scene. But there are some teams that are pretty far into the season already, like Mooresville High School, who just took down Huff High School on Tuesday. Final score 72-69. Mooresville sitting at 5-2. Mooresville High School. How about it? Getting off to a real good start here. They started the season 3-0. They went loss, win in their last 4 games. So a little bit of 500 basketball being played, but they did get the win against a very good Huff High School program. We know Huff High School. Huff always has good sports teams out of Cornelius. They started 3-0, so they were undefeated going into that game against Mooresville, and they dropped their first game. What I find interesting is the schedule right now. It just shows you how sparse the games are. Both Mooresville and Huff's next opponent is Statesville High School. Yeah, you heard me correctly. So basically what's going to happen is Statesville on the 6th, which is Friday, is going to play Mooresville. And then on the 10th, they're going to play Huff High School. But Mooresville and Huff are not going to play a game in between there. So you can see it's spread out. The season is starting off, but it is a slow burn right now. Once we get back from the New Year's, you have back-to-back games, some of them every other day, some of them. So it is going to pick up. There are tournaments, like I said, that are going to be going on during the winter break. We will talk about those. So for Mooresville, they're 5-2. Huff High School sitting at 3-1. Let's talk about that team they're going to be facing next is Statesville High School. They won the first game of the year, 65-43, but then the last 2 games have been tough ones as they lost to Carson High School and Cannon High School. This is a neutral tournament game, the one against Cannon High School. So just keep that in mind. They are playing these like in-season tournaments during the regular season. We're going to go to our first commercial break here. When we come back, I want to continue talking a little basketball, and then we are going to get into the college football scene and talk about what could possibly happen with the rankings, with conference championships, things like that. So don't go anywhere. We're back after this. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Scoreboard, segment 2 here on WSIC. A reminder to you, this episode was pre-recorded. We cannot take your phone calls. I know I hate when I can't do that either, because I know I get some phone calls, Facebook messages, things like that, and YouTube messages, and I like interacting with everyone. But today's episode was recorded at an earlier time. We will be getting back to the live programming here, I promise, every day. But right now we do have some pre-recorded stuff for you. We're talking about high school basketball right now, and then once we're done with that, we're going to shift gears into the college football playoff rankings. Last night, they were released. Last night, we found out who is locked in. Yeah, there are teams locked in now. It's going to be really hard to fall when you don't play a game, right? It's real hard to fall in the rankings at that point. But we are going to talk about what's going on with college football in a second. I do want to continue talking about this high school basketball scene. Statesville High School is who we were discussing. They've lost their last 2 matches. Their record right now is 1-2. So just, again, the discrepancy on schedules here and how many games have been played. Statesville High School 1-2. Mooresville High School 5-2. Another team, Lake Norman High School, they're 5-0. West Iredell 3-2. I mean, you have teams that have only played 3 games. Some have played 4, some 5. it's really all over the place. But obviously, once we get to the end of the season, all of it's going to be very clear. So Statesville 1-2 right now to start the season. Tough start with a losing record with some hard games coming up. Mooresville, Huff, and Lake Norman on the schedule right now for Statesville High School. That is a tough stretch. Now, the good thing is all of those games, according to Max Prep, are home games. They haven't played very many road games. Actually, they haven't played any road games yet on the season. The first 3 games were at home where they won, they lost, and they lost. And the next 3 games are at home, Mooresville, Huff, and Lake Norman. So an interesting start to the season for Statesville High School, who sits at 1-2. Talking about some other schools up here in the northern Iredell area, North Iredell. How about it? Just about as north in Iredell as you can get. They started the year 1-2 here. 3 games into the season. Next game's coming up on Friday against Alexander Central. But North Iredell played South Rowan, a dominating win to start the season. South Rowan, it should be mentioned, has not won a game yet this year, but a big win for North Iredell to start things off. And then a couple of competitive losses after that is what we'll call it. We'll call it competitive losses. 74-63 loss to South Iredell and a 76-52 loss to Davie High School. So both of those games were on the road, though, both of the losses. The win against South Rowan was a home game. So they've won their home games. They lost a couple of their road games. That's how they sit at 1-2 right now, with Alexander Central coming up on Friday. That will be another home game. Speaking of South Iredell, we've talked about them quite a bit. They've played some teams in the area. They started off with Statesville High School and then North Iredell. Loss, win, and then, man, it's been over a week almost since they've played a basketball game. They lost to North Lincoln 84-54. Tough start to the season for South Iredell, but long way to go. Now, the thing is, they have a stretch of 5 games coming up where they are all on the road. Starting today, South Iredell, they play Alexander Central, West Iredell, Bunker Hill, West Cabarrus, North Iredell, all on the road. Yes, those are all road games, all 5 of them, before they come back to a couple of home games against Alexander Central, who they're playing tonight, and then East Rowan. So 1-2 start to the season for South Iredell. They play later tonight. That game is going to tip off at 8 o'clock at Alexander Central. And if you don't know, Alexander Central is over in Taylorsville. So just a little update for you there. Moving on to West Iredell. West Iredell is faring pretty good here to start the year. They won their first game at home against Bunker Hill, 79-65, a pretty convincing win. And then a tough game against Wilkes Central, 88-82. Very close game there on the road. They end up losing that one. And then another road game, which was, like I said, about a week ago now, against Elkin High School, 70-63 on the road. So 2-1 for West Iredell to start their season. They are in action later on tonight as well on the road, taking on Bunker Hill High School. That one's tip off is 7:45, so a little bit earlier than the South Iredell tip off. But that is where West Iredell stands. I want to talk about Lake Norman High School. I mentioned them real quickly. They started the year 5-0. Yes, 5-0, and they haven't really had a close game. No. 69-28, 61-46. That's a 15-point game. 81-59, 77-55, 90-43. Those are the final scores. North Lincoln, Mount Tabor, Marvin Ridge, HPCA, and West Rowan are the opponents there. That HPCA, if you're not familiar, High Point Christian Academy up in High Point. So Lake Norman has started the year 5-0. A very, very good start. They are outscoring their opponents by over 150 points. Just throwing that one out there. I'm sorry, just under 150 points. They're outscoring them by 147 in 5 games. So as you can tell, they're definitely having a good year. No conference games yet for the 4A Greater Metro Conference. And if you need a refresher, Lake Norman, Cox Mill, Mooresville, West Cabarrus, Ale Brown, Hickory Ridge, and South Iredell are in that conference. Nobody's played any conference games yet. We still have a little bit of time before we get there. So 5-0 for Lake Norman to start their season. Last but not least, I want to talk about my alma mater of high school, Pine Lake Prep, who is having a very good start to the season, 3-0, including a nail-biter versus Lake Norman Charter from a couple of weeks ago. Final score, and Pine Lake making the comeback in this one. Final score 64-63. That was from a couple of weeks ago. Most recently, Lake Norman played last night Charlotte Country Day School, and they end up losing that one 70-64. Another close game. A lot of close games for Pine Lake this year. We talked about that 64-63 win and another loss there, 70-64. Actually, their first loss of the year. Next on the docket for Pine Lake coming up on Friday is Christ the King High School. That is a 7:30 tip-off, Christ the King High School. We talked about them quite a bit during the fall out of Huntersville. They're having an okay year, 2-2 to start the campaign. Those wins coming against Albemarle High School and Bonnie Cone Leadership Academy. The losses came against Covenant Day High School and Lake Norman Charter High School. So that's just kind of a quick roundabout on what is going on in the high school basketball scene. We still have 3 more rounds of high school football playoffs, but it doesn't happen as often, right? We all know it's only once a week, right? On Friday Night Lights. So we're going to talk about other sports that are going on. There's other winter sports going on in North Carolina. So we do want to continue to talk about that. Like swimming and diving is a thing too, track and field as well, and some wrestling getting underway also in the winter. Spring has another big docket of sports, man. You got baseball, lacrosse, men's golf, men's tennis, women's softball, soccer. Man, can't wait for the spring, huh? But the winter, the big hitter is the basketball season. But like I said, we still have track and field for indoors, swimming and diving, as well as wrestling. So we'll talk about that as we progress through the winter sports here. But that's just your update on the high school basketball scene. A lot of good teams in the area. Some teams still struggling to find their footing to start the season. Okay, let's move on from the high school scene. We're going to get into college football now. We got about a minute before we have to go to the commercial. So just to start things off, we're going to talk about the college football playoff rankings. Just the rankings, okay? We're going to go let's go from 1 to 14. 1 to 14. Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee, SMU, Indiana, Boise State, Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. You might have noticed a few things. Ohio State no longer ranked second after their loss to Michigan. They dropped down to 6. Miami, tough loss, very tough loss to Syracuse. They dropped down to 12. Georgia jumped a couple of spots. You also had Alabama jump 2 spots. We're going to talk more about what all this means, so don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Segment 3 coming up. We'll talk about the college football playoff rankings. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is segment 3 here on the Scoreboard. No phone calls today. We are doing another pre-recorded episode, and I do apologize if there's some things that break, some breaking news that I am unable to talk about, right? It happens, but we'll talk about everything that we know of as of the recording of this episode. We're talking about the college football playoffs right now, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. This is the first year of the 12-team college football playoff. A reminder, I want to do a full refresher on how this is going to work, okay? No matter what, no matter where you are ranked, the top 5 conference champions, okay, so the 5 best ranked conference champions automatically get a bid to the college football playoff. If you win your conference championship, you are in, okay? The top 4 conference champions get a bye. They do not have to play round 1 of the playoffs. The 5th team does, and the 5th ranked team gets seeded as the 12 seed, okay? They are the final conference champion in. They are seeded as the 12, okay? So there's how that works, right? Then, to fill out the rest of the field, you have your college football playoff rankings in order, okay? So you take out the conference champions, obviously, and then you go down the rankings from there and just fill in your spots. Here's where things get weird. Boise State, number 10. Alabama, number 11. Miami, number 12. Ole Miss, number 13. South Carolina, number 14. Is there a path for Miami? Is there a path for Alabama? There is, actually. Boise State, I do not think is locked into the playoffs, okay? Because when you look at who they are playing, they play number 20, UNLV. UNLV, a good team this year. They made a little bit of news, if you remember the news that they made, where they were not paying one of their recruits his NIL money, and he decides to transfer. So Friday night at 8 o'clock, it'll be UNLV and Boise State for the Mountain West Championship, okay? Whoever wins probably is going to get a bid. And this is where the numbers matter, right? So you have UNLV and Boise State 20 and a 10. The American Athletic Championship, the AAC Championship game, Tulane and Army. Now, we've talked about Army quite a bit. They had an undefeated run for a while until they lost to Notre Dame, right? That was a big loss. It really gave them a hit in the rankings. Army is ranked 24 right now. So behind UNLV. Then you have Iowa State and Arizona, who are 16 and 15. Georgia, Texas, 5 and 2. Penn State, Oregon, 3 and 1. Clemson and SMU. That is a 17 and an 8. Clemson ended up making the ACC championship game with that one loss in the ACC coming to South Carolina, the last game of the regular season. So here is how things would play out if the best ranked team wins. Oregon would beat Penn State, right? So that would be the 1 beating the 3. So the 1 conference champion, automatic bye. They are ranked number 1 already. We know they're going to be the 1 seed. Number 2, Texas, beating number 5, Georgia. Okay? Texas, number 2, win the conference championship, automatic in, they sit at 2. Then it gets weird. The 3rd highest ranked, and this is just if the highest ranked team wins, okay? If the best ranked team wins. The 3rd best ranked team, if they win, would be SMU, number 8. They would be the 3 seed in the college football playoff and get the automatic bye. The 4th best conference champion, if they win the game, obviously, would be Boise State, number 10. They would be the last team to get a bye in the first round. But we still have to add a fifth conference champion, right? That would be between Arizona State and Iowa. Well, if Arizona State or Iowa wins, no matter who it is, they get put into the 12 seed in the bracket. And we have now taken somebody outside the top 12 and added them to the college football playoff, which means whoever is ranked number 12 gets booted out. That is Miami. Now, this is assuming that everybody in these conference championship games don't drop drastically. Like if Georgia loses to Texas, how far in the rankings are they going to drop? If Penn State loses, how far are they going to drop? If Clemson beats SMU, how far does SMU drop? Because then if Clemson wins and it all stays the same the way we just talked about, Clemson would get the automatic bid. SMU would not. You would go down the rankings from there, and there's now two teams outside of the top 12 that are booted out. Those would be Alabama and Miami. But where would SMU fall on the rankings? What if UNLV wins? Boise State ranked 10th. They would likely fall behind Alabama and Miami. So what else happens? What happens in front of them? So it's going to be a crazy end to the season here. The one team that is ranked that's in a conference championship that I do not think has a chance is Army. They are the 6th best ranked conference champion if they end up winning. Unless, something crazy could happen. UNLV could beat Boise State. Army could blow Tulane out of the water. That's 2024. We could see maybe Army gets in front of UNLV somehow. I don't know if that is even possible, but it could happen. And that's all I'm saying. So we do not know who is locked in. The only thing that we know is if you're ranked in the top 8 and you're not playing a conference championship game, you are definitely locked in. Notre Dame, independent, we've talked about them. They are locked in. Ohio State did not make the Big Ten championship game. The Big Ten championship game is Penn State and Oregon. So they really can't fall in the rankings. Ohio State, ranked number 6, is probably locked in. Tennessee didn't make a conference championship game, did they? They're probably locked in, sitting at 7. Indiana, I would assume, is locked in. They're not playing, and it would take, 3? And I don't think there's a way for 3 people outside of the top 12 to win a conference championship. So the people that I think are locked in, the teams that I think are locked in, Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia, and Ohio State. The top 6, and Tennessee, the top 7. Even if Penn State loses, I don't think they fall to 12. I don't think that's possible. Even if Georgia loses to Texas, I don't think they fall far enough to where they get in jeopardy. SMU, my question mark with them is, are they going to win? If they win, fine, they're in. But if they lose, how far do they fall? Because that moves the cut line. Right now, Alabama's ranked ahead of Miami. Somehow, some way, I don't know. And then it's Ole Miss in South Carolina. We're going to talk a little more college football playoffs when we return. I want to talk about the rankings, and then we're going to get into some news in sports. So don't go anywhere. We're back after this. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment here on the Scoreboard. We have been talking about these college football rankings, the conference championship games, what it means for all of these teams, who has a pathway to make the college football playoff. That's basically what we've been going over. And I think we've narrowed it down to quite a few teams here, obviously. But somebody like Clemson, they could sneak their way in. It is possible. It is possible. Because I'm looking at the rankings, and yeah, something to keep an eye on. I want to talk about the the rankings. Okay. We talked about last year, Florida State, should they be in? Should they be out? They had an undefeated regular season. And I'm looking at the rankings from 2023, from when we had this conversation. And going into week 15, which was where the college football playoff rankings mattered, the question was, Alabama, do they deserve to be in? Or does Florida State deserve to be in? I'm sorry. I think I got it a little bit mixed up there. Let's back up on the 2023 rankings and just talk about 2024, okay? The schedule and how things have gone. So I want to talk about 11, 12, 13, and 14. Last year, the conversation was around Florida State. Should they be ranked number 4, even though they're undefeated number 1, so I thought they should have been ranked number 4. And their quarterback is hurt, right? That was the conversation, okay? This year, I think the conversation is the exact same. Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina. It's right around them. You have Alabama 9-3. You have Miami 10-2, Ole Miss 9-3, and South Carolina 9-3. The cutoff line is going to matter. And I think it's going to be right at Alabama, Miami. I think Miami's going to be out. Alabama's going to sneak their way in as the 11th team in the playoffs. I think that's what we are heading towards. And my question is why? Alabama 9-3, Miami 10-2. Why are we still doing this? Putting human opinion into the rankings, into who is making the playoffs and who isn't making the playoffs. I'm looking at who Miami played this year, right? And maybe you could say they had a weak schedule. They lost to Georgia Tech in a competitive game. They lost to Syracuse in a competitive game. That's just ACC for you, right? Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. Alabama lost to Tennessee. And they got blown out by Oklahoma. Now, I guess the win against Georgia holds a lot of weight for Alabama because Georgia ended up being a really good team. They're in a conference championship game. They're 10-2. So maybe that win holds some weight. But honestly, I think Miami should have been ranked ahead of Alabama. I do. They had a good regular season. They had a couple of losses. Alabama didn't have the best regular season, in my opinion. You know, they beat up on the teams they're supposed to beat on. They played Western Kentucky, South Florida, Mercer. I mean, come on. Really? Why are we still adding these games to an SEC schedule? And I guess you could also make that argument, you know, Ole Miss played Furman, Middle Tennessee. So, yeah, you could make the argument for both teams. Sure. But I don't know, something weird about it. And honestly, if we're talking about where people should be ranked, I would have put South Carolina ahead of Miami, ahead of Alabama, ahead of Ole Miss. Now, I know South Carolina lost to Ole Miss and Alabama. I get it. But I feel like their losses were a lot more quality than everybody else. And if we're going to put quality of loss and human opinion into the equation, there you go. I mean, Ole Miss lost to Kentucky, right? Ole Miss lost to Florida. Those are unranked programs. At least South Carolina, they lost to ranked programs, or at least in LSU's case, they were ranked when they played them. And they still had an 8-4 record in the SEC. So, and they beat Clemson, right? That was a huge win for South Carolina. It gave them a chance to make the college football playoff. And yet here we are, and we're still talking about who gets ranked where, human opinion, quality of loss, quality of schedule, things like that. And I think it needs to go away. I do. That's my opinion. You might think otherwise. Remember last year when we had the 2023 college football rankings, it was Alabama, Texas, Washington, Michigan, who ended up being top 4, right? Florida State was the first team out. They went undefeated. And they didn't deserve that. They went undefeated and they won their conference championship. And they were ranked number 5, behind Alabama, who had a loss, and Texas, who also had a loss. Oh, man. We continue to talk about rankings and where teams are ranked based on human opinion. A couple of things that were in the news from yesterday. Did you hear about this golden at-bat rule in Major League Baseball that Rob Manfred's been floating around? If you don't know what a golden at-bat is, basically any team can choose one at-bat in the game where they can put whatever batter they want up to the plate. So let's say it's the bottom of the 9th and there's one out and you're the New York Yankees and Aaron Judge is at the plate and he strikes out. Well, you can use the golden at-bat rule to say, okay, Aaron Judge struck out, but we're going to use our golden at-bat rule. Aaron Judge, get back out there and hit again. And with 2 outs in the 9th, you can have Aaron Judge up again. Think about the Dodgers, man. You can put Shohei Ohtani up in back-to-back at-bats. This is a terrible idea. This is an absolutely horrid idea. I mean, I get some of the changes. Okay? The pitch clock totally makes sense. Some of those guys were human rain delays, and I was guilty of that when I was in high school. I was a slow pitcher as well, okay? But where does it stop? When you're losing popularity, we get it. You've refused to change with the times for years, and now you're panicking. And this isn't the way to fix the game. It isn't. Do I have the solution? No. Do I know how to make baseball more interesting? Not really. I don't think it's the rules. I think it's the philosophy. You have 3 true outcome players now. You either hit a home run, you strike out, or you walk. There's no hit and runs anymore. There's no hitting for contact. And maybe this year we saw a little bit of a change in that, where we did see teams batting, or players at least batting for average. We talked about Bobby Witt and the incredible average that he had. Aaron Judge, he had the home runs, but he also had the batting average to go along with it, over 300. It's the 3 true outcome that's causing baseball to lose interest. The shift was a big problem. At least they got rid of that. Makes sense. But now you're trying to say that you could put a batter up whenever you want. I don't like it, and I don't think it makes sense, honestly. We're going to run out of time here to talk about some other things in the news, but let's talk about some things on this day in sports history, as we do every single day. On this day, 1909, it was the first ever CFL Grey Cup. Yeah, 1909. Toronto, University of Toronto Blues beat the Toronto Parkdale Canoe Club 26-6. Oh, Canada, we love you. We love you. Some other things that happened on this day in sports history. Let's go a little bit more recent on this one. 2011, it was Pedro Martinez officially announcing his retirement from professional baseball. It was on this day in 2023. Caitlin Clark, 22 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists for Iowa against Wisconsin, surpassing the Big Ten career triple-double record. That was on this day last year. Back in 1949, there had yet to be a 99-yard touchdown in the NFL. Bob Gage tied the record on this day, though, with a 97-yard touchdown run. That was on this day, 1949. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into the program today. We got a lot of information in there. The college football playoffs are going to be interesting. I can't wait to see how everything shakes out. I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.